Something unbelievable just unfolded, live on television, throwing the political world into total disarray. Katie Hopkins, the outspoken, unapologetic voice who says what others shy away from, just exposed Angela Rayner's biggest secrets. This wasn't just a critique, it was a ruthless, scathing political dismantling that has left Rayner and the Labour Party scrambling to contain the damage. Hopkins didn't pull any punches. She tore into Rayner's deceit, corruption, and incompetence, laying bare everything Labour would rather keep hidden. Now, growing numbers of people are calling for Rayner to step down. Katie Hopkins just did what no mainstream journalist dares. She exposed the raw truth about Angela Rayner and Labour's catastrophic failures. And let's be clear, this wasn't a gentle political analysis. It was an all-out assault. Hopkins went straight for the heart of the matter, revealing how Rayner built her career on deception, empty rhetoric, and outright hypocrisy. If Labour thought they could dodge accountability, they were sorely mistaken. She wasted no time in dismantling Rayner's so-called leadership. For years, Rayner has portrayed herself as the champion of the working class, the defender of ordinary Britons.
Tell us how many days a worker on the minimum wage would have to work this year in order to afford a night at a luxury hotel, say in Crete.
But Hopkins exposed the brutal reality. Rayner is nothing more than a political performer, reciting scripted lines while evading real scrutiny. Her speeches are carefully rehearsed, talking points meant to sound appealing, but ultimately mean nothing. And when it comes to actual policies, Rayner has delivered nothing but failures, broken commitments, and decisions that make life harder for the very people she claims to fight for. And it gets even darker. Hopkins didn't just call out Rayner's failures, she laid bare her corruption. According to Hopkins, Rayner and Labour have spent years enriching themselves while urging struggling Britons to tighten their belts. While pensioners shiver in their homes and families battle soaring costs, Labour elites enjoy luxury, funded by taxpayers. Hopkins didn't sugarcoat it, she called it exactly what it is, a betrayal of the British public. But the most explosive moment? Hopkins revealed that under Rayner's leadership, Labour has been actively working to silence critics. Instead of answering difficult questions and facing public scrutiny, Rayner and her allies have allegedly been operating behind the scenes to suppress opposition. Whether it's censoring political adversaries, controlling media narratives, or shutting down open discussion, Hopkins exposed Labour's true agenda and focused on power and control rather than democracy and free speech. And now, Britain is waking up. Following Hopkins' brutal exposé, demands for Rayner's resignation are growing. Public outrage is mounting. People want transparency. They want accountability. And Labour? They're in full damage control mode, scrambling to contain the fallout. But the truth is out. The damage is irreversible. And Hopkins has sent a stark message. Angela Rayner's political career may never recover from this. Katie Hopkins didn't just highlight Rayner's hypocrisy, she tore down the carefully constructed facade that Rayner has spent years maintaining. For too long, Labour has propped her up as a voice for the people, a leader supposedly in touch with the struggles of everyday Britons. But Hopkins dismantled that illusion entirely, proving that Rayner's leadership is nothing more than political theatre, meticulously crafted to mislead the public. Every speech, every interview, every so-called spontaneous remark is rehearsed, scripted, and designed to manipulate rather than inform. And the most disgraceful part? The very people who put their faith in her, struggling families, pensioners barely scraping by, workers desperately holding on to their jobs, are the ones being let down the most. Hopkins made it painfully obvious. Rayner doesn't lead, she acts. And when genuine leadership is required, when Britain is faced with real crises demanding strong, decisive action, Rayner is nowhere to be seen. Whether it's the cost of living crisis, rising crime, the breakdown of vital public services, or the growing frustration of working-class Britons, Rayner's reaction is always predictable. Empty words, hollow slogans, and a relentless effort to shift responsibility onto anyone but Labour. Hopkins didn't just call out Rayner's incompetence, she laid bare the harsh reality. Rayner and her party have no answers. They have only excuses. And the British public has had enough. But this is where Hopkins' takedown became even more damning. She revealed how Rayner and Labour are masters of spin. using carefully crafted soundbites to give the illusion of action while doing absolutely nothing to address the very problems they helped create. Take the economy, for instance. Labour constantly preaches about fairness, justice, and economic equality. But what do they actually do? They push for higher taxes on hard-working Britons while safeguarding their own financial interests. They claim to stand with the underprivileged while backing policies that make life even tougher for small business owners, self-employed workers, and middle-class families. Hopkins left no room for doubt. Labour isn't interested in making Britain better. Their only priority is holding on to power. And Rayner? She's nothing but a mouthpiece, parroting the lines carefully scripted by Labour's inner circle. And let's not ignore Labour's relentless war on free speech, something Hopkins exposed in chilling detail. Under Rayner's leadership, Labour has adopted an authoritarian stance, treating opposition as something to be crushed, rather than a debate to be won. Hopkins warned that Labour isn't open to discussion. They want total dominance over the narrative. Whether it's through manipulating the press, silencing critics, or branding anyone who questions them as a threat, Labour's message is clear. They don't want democracy, they want obedience. Think that sounds like an exaggeration? Just look at the pattern. Labour demands stricter regulations on social media to tackle so-called misinformation. But who decides what qualifies as misinformation? Labour pushes for tougher hate speech laws. But who gets to define what constitutes hate speech? Every move they make is carefully designed to ensure that only one voice, Labour's voice, is permitted. Hopkins sounded the alarm. If Labour continues down this road, Britain risks becoming a country where questioning those in power is treated as a crime. And Rayner? She's leading the charge, grinning as she dismantles the very freedom she claims to uphold. This isn't leadership, it's control. And the British people are finally waking up to it. Hopkins' takedown wasn't just another political critique. It was a wake-up call. Labour isn't there to uplift the working class. They're there to exploit them. And Rayner? She's not their champion, she's their distraction. Now that the truth is out, Labour is scrambling. Because once the people realize they've been lied to, there's no turning back. The calls for Rayner's resignation aren't just growing louder, they're becoming impossible to drown out. Katie Hopkins didn't just expose Angela Rayner's failures, she dragged Labour's deepest secrets into the light, shattering the carefully constructed illusion they've relied on for years. For so long, Rayner has sold herself as a working-class hero, a straight-talking fighter for ordinary Britons. But Hopkins tore that image apart piece by piece, exposing the truth Labour desperately wants to keep hidden. Rayner's career isn't built on principles, policies, or genuine care for the people. It's built on deceit, double standards, and an unrelenting hunger for power, even if it means betraying those who believed in her the most. One of the most damning truths Hopkins uncovered is how Rayner's financial choices contradict her carefully crafted public persona. This is the same politician who lectures struggling households on economic prudence while enjoying a lifestyle completely detached from the daily hardships of ordinary Britons. Her expenditures, her monetary dealings, and her dubious property transactions all cast serious doubt on her credibility. And yet, Labour insists she truly grasps the struggles of working families. Hopkins exposed the uncomfortable truth. Rayner is nothing more than a career politician who presents one face to the public while behaving quite differently in private. But the scandals don't stop at financial double standards. Hopkins also shone a spotlight on the disturbing reports concerning Rayner's behavior within Labour's own circles. There have long been whispers regarding her treatment of colleagues, her involvement in backroom power games, and the calculated way she has climbed Labour's internal hierarchy. Those who dare to question her authority are swiftly cast aside, and Labour figures who refuse to conform face career-ending consequences. This isn't leadership, it's control through coercion. Hopkins left no doubt. Rayner's grip on power isn't rooted in respect or capability, it's built on fear and manipulation. This betrayal runs deep, and now Labour's own supporters are starting to turn against her. The outrage isn't limited to social media. On the streets, in cafes, and in workplaces, people are openly questioning how Rayner is still in office. Why is a politician with such a history of scandal allowed to shape the nation's future? Why should taxpayers continue to bankroll a public figure who has consistently proven untrustworthy? These aren't fleeting grievances. They are urgent calls for accountability. The more Labour refuses to acknowledge them, the more self-inflicted harm they suffer. The party's worst fear is becoming reality. Their own voter base is losing confidence. Labour has long depended on working-class backing, but Rayner's behaviour and Hopkins' revelations have triggered a crisis of credibility. Those who once believed in Labour's commitments are now waking up to the truth. This is no longer a party that stands for them. If Labour is willing to sweep corruption under the rug, if they are prepared to defend politicians who misuse their authority, then what else are they concealing? This unsettling question is now spreading among the electorate, and it's one Labour simply cannot afford to dismiss. The press, too, is beginning to feel the heat. For years, mainstream outlets have shielded Labour from critical examination, waving off concerns as partisan smears or unfounded claims. But now, with the relentless public backlash, they are being forced to confront the facts. More revelations are emerging, more scrutiny is being applied, and even journalists sympathetic to Labour are struggling to justify Rayner's action. The cracks in the establishment's defensive barrier are widening, and once the media loses control of the narrative, it's only a matter of time before the entire truth collapses into view. And then there's the issue of corruption, a word that Labour and its media allies avoid at all costs. Hopkins didn't hold back in exposing how Rayner has cemented herself at the heart of Labour's most dubious dealings, using her influence not to serve those who elected her, but to advance those who can strengthen her hold on power. Whether she's ingratiating herself with union leaders, evading scrutiny over her private affairs, or exploiting her role to shield Labour figures embroiled in scandal, Rayner's actions lay bare a politician more focused on self-preservation than genuine public service, and the British public is starting to take notice. Hopkins made it clear that Rayner's controversies aren't just personal failings, they reveal a wider decay within Labour itself. This is a party that endlessly lectures on integrity, transparency, and accountability, yet refuses to apply those same principles to its own leadership. If a Conservative MP had even a fraction of Rayner's baggage, Labour would be demanding an immediate resignation. But when it's one of their own, silence, deflection, and a willing media machine prepared to distract, downplay, or outright fabricate narratives to protect their chosen elite. But Hopkins' exposé made one thing clear. Labour can no longer suppress this. The truth is out, and the more they attempt to conceal it, the more disastrous it becomes. Perhaps the most explosive revelation in Hopkins' takedown of Rayner was her exposure of Labour's never-ending hypocrisy on morality and principle. Labour presents itself as the champion of the working class, yet it's overflowing with career politicians who have never held an ordinary job in their lives. They claim to stand for free expression, yet they work tirelessly to silence those who disagree with them. They preach ethical governance while turning a blind eye to misconduct within their own ranks. And Angela Rayner? She sits at the very center of it all. A politician who insists she is different, yet embodies everything rotten about the political elite. But the real question is, how much longer can Labour shield her? How much longer can they pretend Rayner's controversies aren't a mounting crisis? Public frustration is reaching breaking point. Calls for her resignation are only getting louder, and Labour is rapidly running out of options to contain the damage. Hopkins laid bare the truth Labour dreads the most. Angela Rayner isn't their strength. She's their greatest weakness, and unless Labour takes action soon, she could very well bring them down with her. The British public isn't oblivious. They recognize the double standards, the deceit, and the outright misconduct. And now, thanks to Katie Hopkins' unrelenting exposé, the fury towards Angela Rayner is hitting a tipping point. People aren't just disappointed, they are outraged. And Labour can no longer turn a blind eye to the mounting demand for transparency. Rayner's controversies have sparked a wave of indignation. Across social platforms, in political discussions, and among the working-class communities she claims to champion, the outcry for her resignation grows louder by the day. Hopkins' revelation of Rayner's concealed wrongdoings has shattered the carefully curated image Labour has spent years promoting. This isn't merely another partisan criticism. It's a reckoning. The public is finally witnessing the true Angela Rayner, the one Labour has worked tirelessly to obscure. And what they see isn't a fearless advocate for ordinary people, but a self-serving figure who has exploited her influence for personal advantage while masquerading as their defender. Labour's leadership is in disarray. They realize that Rayner's controversies have become a burden they can no longer ignore. Behind closed doors, urgent talks are underway. Should they stand by her? Should they let her go to save the party? If they defend her, they risk plunging Labour into deeper turmoil. But if they push her out, they acknowledge that Hopkins and her critics were right from the start. It's a no-win scenario, and Labour is quickly running out of options. Yet, the most devastating blow isn't coming from the Tories, the press, or even political figures like Hopkins. It's coming from Labour's own supporters. The very people who once championed Rayner are now abandoning her. The sense of betrayal is overwhelming. The contradictions are glaring. And Labour's inaction is proving they are no different from the corrupt elites they claim to oppose. The tension is escalating. Calls for her to step aside are growing stronger. The question is no longer whether Rayner will fall, but when. And when that time comes, Labour will have no one to blame but themselves. Angela Rayner is running out of room to maneuver. The pressure is closing in, and Labour's frantic efforts to shield her from the backlash are failing miserably. What began as a handful of inconvenient controversies has snowballed into a full-blown political catastrophe, one that threatens to dismantle Labour's foundation from within. But the most damning aspect? The outrage isn't just coming from her regular opponents, it's emerging from within Labour itself. Behind the curtain, the party is in a state of chaos. Labour's leadership, already grappling with internal strife and a widening credibility gap, is now backed into an impossible dilemma. Do they rally behind Rayner and risk taking the whole party down with her? Or do they cut her loose in a desperate attempt to contain the damage? Both paths lead to disaster. If they shield her, they'll be accused of covering up misconduct and disregarding the electorate's will. But if they remove her, they concede defeat, proving that Katie Hopkins, the public, and Rayner's critics were right all along. Labour's worst nightmare is playing out in real time. Public resentment isn't fading, it's escalating. The scandal surrounding Rayner has sparked a tidal wave of anger, and Labour's usual spin tactics are falling flat. Social media is ablaze with demands for her resignation. Outraged citizens are flooding radio shows, contacting MPs, and openly questioning why Labour is safeguarding someone with such a tainted history. Even the mainstream media, long regarded as Labour's protective barrier, is now being forced to confront the uproar. They can no longer brush off the public's frustration. And as the backlash intensifies, even journalists who traditionally align with Labour are struggling to defend her. For years, Labour has relied on smoke and mirrors to shape public opinion. They've leveraged media allies to suppress damaging reports, dismissed critics as far-right agitators, and buried inconvenient facts beneath layers of spin. But this time, the narrative is slipping from their grasp. The truth is out. And thanks to Katie Hopkins' scathing exposé, it can no longer be ignored. The public is alert, and they want answers. The outrage isn't confined to the digital sphere. It's spilling into the real world. Labour MPs are inundated with furious emails from constituents. Party meetings are descending into chaos, with members demanding accountability. And the more Labour attempts to sidestep the crisis, the deeper they sink. Every weak deflection, every feeble PR stunt only amplifies the public's fury. This isn't just a controversy. It's an outright revolt against Labour's duplicity. But the greatest shock is coming from within Labour's own ranks. Working-class Britons, the very people Rayner claims to advocate for, feel utterly deceived. They placed their trust in her. They believed her when she vowed to fight for those in need. But now, the illusion has crumbled. She's just another self-serving politician playing the system for personal gain. And that realization stings. Those who once defended her are now calling for her removal. Lifelong Labour voters are questioning whether the party still deserves their allegiance. And for Labour, this crisis is spiraling into a catastrophe they never saw coming. This isn't just about Rayner anymore, it's about Labour's entire integrity. If they stand by her, the message is clear. Misconduct is tolerated as long as you're on the right side. But if they cut her loose, they risk unearthing even more skeletons. Because let's face it, Rayner isn't the only one with something to hide. If she goes down, who follows? How many more senior Labour figures have secrets waiting to surface? And then there's the political landscape. The general election looms. Labour had planned to capitalize on public frustration with the Conservatives to secure a win. But now, instead of zeroing in on Tory blunders, they're entangled in their own disaster. The headlines aren't about Labour's agenda for Britain. They're dominated by Angela Rayner's controversies and the party's frantic efforts to shield her. Each day this saga continues, Labour's reputation erodes. Each moment they hesitate, they hemorrhage support. Meanwhile, the Tories and Reform UK are relishing the spectacle. They don't need to attack. Labour is self-destructing. Nigel Farage, already making waves with his scathing takedowns of the establishment, is leveraging this mess to drive his point home. Labour isn't the party of the working class. It's the party of double standards, deceit, and self-interest. And voters are paying attention. The longer Labour ignores the public's calls for Rayner's removal, the more they resemble the very politicians they claim to challenge. But the final blow? The shifting poll numbers. Before this scandal exploded, Labour enjoyed a commanding lead. Now, that margin is eroding at speed. Surveys indicate a sharp dip in backing. And for the first time in months, doubts are creeping in about whether Labour's path to victory is as assured as they once assumed. And if Rayner clings to her position, the downward spiral will only pick up pace. Small cracks are widening into deep fractures. The pressure is overwhelming. And inside Labour HQ, the tension is unbearable. They understand what's at stake. They know the electorate won't stand for this prolonged defense of Rayner. They realize that if this crisis drags on, it could cost them power. Yet they're paralyzed, afraid to concede failure, afraid of what else might come to light, and most of all, afraid of the storm that's about to break. Angela Rayner's downfall is inevitable. The only uncertainty left is, how much more harm will she cause Labour before they finally let her go? Angela Rayner is teetering on the edge of political oblivion. What began as quiet murmurs has now turned into an uproar. And every moment Labour delays taking action, the consequences worsen. The party's leadership is in turmoil, scrambling behind closed doors, desperately seeking a way to contain the damage. But deep down, they know the reality. This cannot be salvaged. The people's verdict is clear. Rayner must go. The only remaining question is whether she will exit on her own terms or be forced out in disgrace. But Rayner, ever the warrior, refuses to concede. Her entire career has been built on the image of a working-class champion, someone who overcame adversity to stand against the establishment. Resigning now would mean admitting that everything she stood for was a fabrication. Rather than showing remorse, rather than addressing the scandals, she digs in. She lashes out at her detractors, dismissing the uproar as a smear campaign. She calls the public backlash a coordinated attack by the usual opponents. And in a last-ditch effort, she tries to portray herself as the true victim, arguing that she's being singled out because of her background, not her actions. But this time, the people aren't buying it. They've heard all the excuses, all the deflections, all the finger-pointing before, and they've had enough. The harder Rayner fights back, the bigger the outrage grows. Social media erupts in fury. Radio hosts openly mock her attempts to control the narrative. Labour MPs, previously her staunch allies, begin distancing themselves, unwilling to defend her publicly. Even the mainstream media, typically sympathetic to Labour, starts to turn against her. The pressure is mounting, and Rayner's options are rapidly diminishing. Behind the scenes, Labour is in absolute disarray. Strategists, PR teams, and senior MPs are locked in urgent discussions late into the night. The conversations are ruthless. Some insist Rayner must resign immediately to prevent further fallout. Others, wary of the precedent it would set, argue for waiting, hoping the storm will subside. But the data speaks for itself. Polls show Labour's support nosediving. Constituency offices are being overwhelmed with furious messages. The party's reputation is crumbling, and with the general election looming, Labour's leadership is gripped by fear. Then, the final blow lands. A devastating new revelation emerges, one Labour had desperately hoped to keep hidden. It's worse than anyone anticipated. If the previous controversies were damaging, this one is catastrophic. The leaked details expose the full extent of the corruption, implicating not only Rayner, but other top Labour figures. This is no longer just about one individual, it's about the party's integrity as a whole. And with this revelation, calls for Rayner's resignation escalate into outright demands. The public outrage reaches its peak. Demonstrations erupt. Constituents gather outside Labour offices, demanding accountability. News channels dedicate entire segments to dissecting every deception, every cover-up, every betrayal. And at the heart of it all, Angela Rayner still refusing to bow out. But the decision is no longer hers to make. The leadership recognizes that if she remains, Labour's election prospects could be shattered. They have no choice, they must act. The internal conflict within the party becomes ruthless. Divisions emerge, those intent on shielding Rayner at all costs, and those convinced she's a liability that must be eliminated. Keir Starmer, once her closest ally, finds himself trapped between factions. Forcing her out risks alienating a segment of the party's base. But doing nothing could mean losing everything. The stakes are sky high. Then, in a dramatic late-night gathering, the verdict is reached. Angela Rayner must step down. The approach is calculated yet ruthless. Labour's leadership will apply private pressure, making it clear that if she refuses to resign, they will withdraw support publicly and mercilessly exposing the secrets they've shielded. This isn't about fairness. It isn't about accountability. It's about political survival. By morning, Labour MPs begin sending out subtle but unmistakable messages. Angela Rayner has contributed greatly to the party. They state, "But we must look forward." Some go further, implying that Labour needs to move beyond distractions. The writing is on the wall. Rayner is being ousted. The decisive moment comes when major Labour donors quietly threaten to pull their funding unless swift action is taken. That seals it. There's no way back. After days of defiance and weeks of denial, Angela Rayner finally surrenders. The resignation announcement is carefully scripted to preserve her dignity. She doesn't confess to wrongdoing. She doesn't address the scandals. Instead, she claims she's stepping aside to focus on personal matters and for the party's greater good. But everyone knows the reality. She wasn't stepping down. She was removed. Labour sacrificed her to protect themselves. Yet the damage is irreversible. Labour's credibility is in tatters. The scandal has exposed the party's deep-seated rot. No amount of PR spin can undo that. The opposition seizes the moment. Nigel Farage delivers a blistering critique, branding Labour a party of corruption, deception, and betrayal. Conservative MPs use the fiasco to deflect from their own troubles, reminding voters that Labour is no different. And the public? Their fury hasn't faded. They've seen the truth laid bare, and they won't forget. Rayner may be gone, but the fallout is far from over. Investigations expand. More names emerge. And the looming question remains, who's next? Because if Angela Rayner was willing to deceive, manipulate, and cover up the truth, how many others in Labour are guilty of the same? Angela Rayner is finished, forced out by her own party, abandoned by those she once defended, and publicly humiliated. But the crisis she leaves behind is only just beginning. Her resignation is merely the first act in a deeper unraveling one that reveals Labour's very foundations as riddled with corruption. For days, the media revels in the scandal. Political analysts scrutinize every stage of Rayner's downfall, from the first allegations to her final departure. The headlines are brutal. Rayner's web of lies exposed. Labour's culture of corruption laid bare. A party in crisis. Can Labour recover? It's a media frenzy unlike anything Labour has endured in years. And the consequences are even more devastating than their worst critics had imagined. Meanwhile, inside Labour HQ, the panic deepens. Rayner's departure was meant to stem the crisis. Instead, it has only intensified it. The public isn't satisfied with one resignation. They want accountability. They demand answers. Journalists, independent watchdogs, and even former party insiders begin revealing more. It turns out Rayner's misconduct was not an isolated case. More names surface. More cover-ups are unearthed. More corruption is exposed. Then, the inevitable happens. Parliament is forced to intervene. What started as a scandal has escalated into a full-scale inquiry into Labour's inner workings. MPs are called in for questioning. Financial records are requested. And as scrutiny increases, Labour's skeletons begin tumbling out at an alarming rate. Public confidence in Labour crumbles overnight. Survey results reveal a seismic shift. Millions who once viewed Labour as the people's party now see them as deceitful, self-interested opportunists. The fury is unmistakable. Lifelong Labour supporters who entrusted the party for years now feel utterly abandoned. The sense of betrayal is absolute. And just when Labour assumes things can't deteriorate further, they do. Katie Hopkins strikes once more. Fresh from her triumph over Rayner, Hopkins escalates, exposing even deeper levels of corruption within Labour's inner circle. Her latest revelation is larger, more damning, and even more explosive than before. It's not just Rayner under scrutiny. Numerous senior Labour figures are now implicated in the party's web of deceit. This time, the evidence is irrefutable. Hopkins presents solid proof: files, testimonies, leaked correspondence, clear confirmation that Labour has misled the public for years. The public reaction is swift and unforgiving. Social media explodes with outrage. Demands for additional resignations swamp Parliament. Keir Starmer, already weakened by the scandal, is now struggling to keep his grip on power. The pressure is insurmountable. The Labour Party is imploding. And then it happens. The ultimate consequence. Labour's support craters in crucial battlegrounds. In the countdown to the general election, the party that once seemed poised for victory now faces the nightmare of total defeat. Polls reveal an unprecedented collapse in Labour's popularity. Safe Labour constituencies, held for generations, are now in jeopardy. The unimaginable is unfolding. Voters who once placed their trust in Labour now feel forsaken, deceived, and enraged. The working class backbone that Labour depended on for decades, they're walking away. Loyal supporters are turning their backs, disgusted by the deception and corruption. Ex-Labour voters are now flocking to other parties, some shifting to the Conservatives in frustration, others seeing Reform UK as a credible alternative. Labour's leadership scrambles to limit the fallout. They beg voters for another chance, pledging reform, vowing that the party will set things right. But it's too late. The people have seen Labour's true face, and they refuse to be misled again. As election night looms, Labour's ultimate humiliation becomes undeniable. A party once on the brink of governing is now on the verge of collapse. Keir Starmer's leadership is hanging by a thread. The party's top figures are in full-blown panic. And Angela Rayner? She has vanished from sight. Her career is finished. The woman who once branded herself a champion of the working class is now a disgraced politician, remembered not for her achievements, but for her downfall. And Labour? The party that tried to bury the scandals? The one that believed it could simply brush everything aside? They are now facing the full consequences. The people have opened their eyes. The Labour Party is shattered beyond recovery, and Britain will never trust them again. Share your views in the comments and subscribe to our channel for more UK news. Thank you.